Hello, everybody. Welcome into On Her Turf. This is the podcast where we talk about various women, amazing women that have inspired us, women that make other women want to be better. One of those women is my co-host, MJ Acosta-Ruiz. MJ, oh, it's so good to see you, girl. I feel like it's been a month because of the holidays. And I don't know about you, but it was this whirlwind where I'm still picking myself up off the floor. But it was wonderful. How was yours?
It was great. It definitely feels like a whirlwind because similar to you, I'm still working. I always say like holidays, I don't know her. It's in the sports world. They don't really exist. But it was awesome to at least take a day or two and just take in the moment and have just a minute to breathe as we're still pushing through, the season here, seasons, depending on which sport you're covering. Yeah.
Wait, truth serum here. Do you feel guilty if you have a holiday off? Because I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes because of what you just said, it feels strange, right? Maybe
I'm
for
not
a
gonna
minute.
lie. For like 3 seconds, I'm like, dang, everybody else is still working. And then I'm like, hold on,
right?
You know what? Let me go ahead and take this cocoa and relax. Because it really is
Watch
so
the
fleeting,
game on
right?
TV.
You get 3 seconds and then you're right back in it. So we have to stop feeling guilty. But I won't lie to you. It definitely still creeps up.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's kind of how I feel too. No, but it was so nice to get some time away and really great to be back. And I'm so excited for this week and our guest.
Yes. And listen, this is the way to start the pod episode for 2022 because I have a full list of accolades and I am going to name off every single one because they are that epic. So this week's guest is an Olympic gold medalist, a FIFA Women's World Cup champion. Thank you very much. A U.S. Women's National Team member, a two-time NWSL champion during her time in Kansas City, as well as a 4-time NWSL Defender of the Year, and is currently a standout leader for the Portland Thorns. Becky Sauerbrunn, welcome to On Her Turf.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm already loving the start of this podcast.
That's awesome. Patrick Mahomes would be jealous. You know that, girl. We obviously we have a ton to talk about, but we want to start out with some fun, right? Some getting to know you things, some ice-breaking material, if you will. So I'll start it off. If you could make one rule, Becky, that everyone had to follow, what rule would you make and why?
I would say that everyone needs to be on time. Like if you set a time to do something, you need to be on time. Because I feel like it's pretty selfish when you're like 5-10 minutes late, because then you're making everything about you as opposed to what you're meeting for. So that would be my rule.
Where did you learn that? Like, where was that ingrained?
It's probably ingrained when I first started dating my boyfriend and he was late for everything.
Oh, wow.
Everything.
Oh, I definitely thought you were going to say it. So it started when I started in sports and I had to be on time for practice.
Same.
I love your answer so much better.
And also one side note, my son just walked in the room. He was in bed a little bit ago, but this is the glory of being on the East Coast, right? And we were just talking about this with him because my husband's like, you've got to be 5 minutes early to be on time. That's it. And I try to live that way, but I'm still trying to live that way. So anyway, I'm going to say good night. Okay. All right. We love you very much.
Oh, so sweet. See, listen, this is real life working from home. Listen, when it comes to work stuff, it's clockwork. I know exactly where I need to be. Everything else though, I think my friends know if dinner is at 8, I'm gonna be late. I'm gonna be there, but I'm gonna be late. Like it's just because in my head, I'm like, okay, it'll take me 15 minutes to get there. Incorrect. I live in Los Angeles. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Like it's going to take me more than 15 minutes. But I have this like complex where I think like, nah, I can do it. I'm the one who can like, I don't know, magically erase all the rules of reality and of traffic and make it there in 15 minutes. So I apologize to everyone. I'm going to be there, but I'm going to be a little late.
But I love that. By the way, my son just said, I was going to bed and then I heard the game show. So he thinks this is a game show, which is all good.
I love that.
All right. Next up, MJ.
What's your first memory of watching women's sports?
I think the first thing that I actually remember is my dad taking me to a college game. So I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And I think he took me to a Mizzou game and they were playing UNC, who at the time, dynasty. I mean, they're still pretty much a dynasty. So they were in town and he dragged me out there. And I remember watching, it was freezing cold. And I was just enthralled. And that's kind of one of my earliest memories of watching women's sports and women's soccer in particular.
Wow. Were you playing yet at the time at all?
Yeah, I was playing. I was pretty young. But I was starting to play kind of, that at the local park with your elementary school friends. So really just casual, fun weekend thing. So that was probably the start.
All right. What's your guilty pleasure during training? Like the thing that you turn to when you sort of need a pick me up?
Oh, wow. Like when I'm in the mix of training and just super tired and.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Super tired. Or maybe you have a little more time off than normal for whatever reason.
If it's actually like a time where I can go take a trip, it's probably I'm like on this search to find the world's best mojito. So that's probably one of like my biggest guilty pleasures. It's like searching everywhere on this planet for it.
That's awesome.
I love that. Okay, this next one, low key in like we call it prep. I call it subtle stalking of you as we were getting ready for this. I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm really excited to ask you this because I want recommendations. What podcast other than On Her Turf are you listening to that we should all get hooked on?
Oh, hooked on? I really like the serialized like fiction. And so Tanis, the Black Tapes. I'm listening to one right now called Parkdale Haunt, which is about like a haunted house and some friends that are there building back the house. I mean, there's a lot, but those are three of my really good, easy ones to get fixed on.
I like anything true crime that is going to make me nervous, even if I'm home alone for 5 seconds. But it's very much what I'm into.
All right, Becky, what do you remember about the first time you won prize money for an athletic achievement and what you spent it on?
Wow. Okay. So I think the first time I made significant money was probably after 2015 Women's World Cup when we won, and I bought myself my first car. And I still have that car, to be honest. It's my favorite car. I'm never probably going to get rid of it.
What's the make? What is it?
Cute little silver Audi A3. Yeah.
I love this for you. Very cute. I drove my college car until it literally had 250,000 miles on it. My mom was like, if you don't get yourself a new car immediately, I'm not going to help you if you get stuck on the side of the road. It got to that point.
Oh, yeah. I needed a new car. I had a Pontiac Sunfire that was on its last legs.
Okay. So you're a hiker. Yes. Like the outdoors. I do not. I hate them, but I do it for my husband. Have you ever come across any wild animals on any of your hikes?
No scary wild animals. I mean, we've seen in Belize just like monster bugs. We've seen monkeys when we've gone to some of Central America and South America. So not crazy wild, nothing where I was like, I'm scared.
I was trying to think of a good animal story and I don't really have one.
I think it's fortunate we don't have that.
That is very true. We had one time growing up, and I've told my kids this story several times, we had a bat fly into our house. And so that's been like the story that keeps on giving. A bat, we were eating dinner and somehow this bat got in our house in the basement and we had to call the game warden, and the game warden came to the house with this like a picker thing that like looked like a toy and a bag. That the game warden went downstairs, came up, that bag was like, anyway, It was amazing. It was amazing. But
immediately know I'd be out of there so fast. Wild animals, different story, right? Wilderness, I'm out. But like
that's not true. We're going to warm you up. I have ideas. Speaking of warm up, this has been such a fun warm up with Becky Sauerbrunn. We have so much more though to talk about. We're getting to know Olympic gold medalist Becky Sauerbrunn on the On Her Turf podcast.
All right, we're here with soccer superstar Becky Sauerbrunn. And Becky, you've played in 3 Olympic Games now. What's been your favorite Olympic memory? I know it's tough to pick.
Favorite Olympic memory would probably be 2012 in London. We got to play at Wembley, which is just this like historic stadium where the English national team plays, and there was 80,000 people. And, you know, we had just lost to Japan in the 2011 World Cup. So we were facing Japan in the final again, and we get the win 2-1, and just, it's kind of amazing. And it's hard to put into words what it feels like to win a gold medal. I think Americans really love the Olympics and they love gold medalists. And to be able to say that I am a gold medalist, it's still kind of crazy that I get to say that. But to experience it and to witness, like to live in the village for that little bit of time, which is wild. The village is wild. All the rumors are true. And then, and then just to like have the medal, and it's really special.
When you think back, what was it going through your mind in that moment?
I wasn't playing a lot for the national team. I was on the newer side of things. And the center back that I was kind of the understudy for got hurt. So I actually ended the game on the field, and I was in like the huddle that happened.
Okay.
And so like, that's like my immediate like reaction was just like such gratitude for like being actually on the field and then being able to like hug these amazing women and being like, oh my gosh, we did it.
Wait, that's such a cool thing though. Can you take us inside that huddle since you just brought that up? Because that's gold to hear that.
I mean, the huddle is where it's at after, we had an epic huddle after 2019 too, that I immediately run back to my goalkeeper and we're embracing. And then all the defenders come in, we have this like defender hug. But honestly, the huddles at the end of games, at the end of important tournaments like that, like to me, those are always the best memory of all the tournaments. It's like such a sense of camaraderie, of relief. I mean, you have so much stress throughout the entire tournament that just keeps building up and all these expectations. And all of a sudden it's like this sense of freedom and lightness. And I think about why I keep doing this to myself. Like, why do I, fight through injuries? And why do I keep, kind of putting my life on hold sometimes? And it's for those brief moments where you just feel so light. And I think I'm addicted to searching for that and feeling that over and over again.
I feel that. I mean, that's sort of the payoff in all of that, right? Like that's literally the moment that you work so hard for. And it feels like a fleeting thing, but it sticks with you clearly for so long. I am, however, not going to let you breeze by the village mention here.
So glad.
It was like your favorite Olympic memory. What's your favorite village memory that you can share, on a family show?
Exactly. Well, it's interesting because the soccer tournament for the Olympics is not always in the host city. So we were all over England in 2012, and we just got to end in London for the semi and the final. And at that point, a lot of the other athletes had already done their events. And so they're just partying. And so you just hear people partying. Man. And you also have just a lot of attractive people who are very fit in the same rooms, sharing space. So
there's a lot happening. It's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of hormones all going on at once. Everybody's young and hot. I get it. When MJ rattled down the list of your accomplishments, Becky, Olympic gold and bronze, 2 World Cups, golds and a silver. Which one can you say which means the most?
It's really tough to pick one, but I would say that the 2015 Women's World Cup, that for me, it has always been a dream of mine to make a World Cup roster, but then to also play in the games and to actually like physically contribute. And that was the first time that I got to do that. And so for me, I think it was proof to myself that like, I can do this. Like I can be on this team and I can contribute and I can help in our success and I can bring people along with me. And so it was really for me, it was like a test, and I got to pass the test, which not all athletes get to do sometimes.
Wow, that's huge. I like to think of soccer as like a marathon sport. I don't feel like there's ever really an off season, and you guys play on different teams. So you have your club team and then you have to switch to like a national team, get ready for the Olympics. Is there a noticeable switch for you, or how is that process going from a club team, for example, to a national team or getting ready for something like an Olympic game?
I very much feel like I have 2 full-time jobs. So for me, playing professionally and internationally, 2 very different things with very different staffs and people and expectations. And the national team, you kind of hop in and hop out, whereas the professional side, you're really in there working day in and day out. And so it's really tough, and you do have to switch your mindset, and you still have to give everything to every team that you play on. And then you throw in an Olympics or a World Cup, and all of a sudden there's this added layer of training and expectations and sacrifice. And you're right. It is all year round. And then it's also like doing 2 jobs.
And also one thing we were talking about, not to get us off the path, but the amount, and I know that it's a bit different in soccer, but the amount of clubs that you've been a part of too. I was so impressed by that, just looking at all of them. And it was making me wonder, first of all, I know about your leadership, and I really, later on, we have to talk about that because you're such a master at just messaging and motivating. But it struck me as being like, okay, obviously you have the beauty of being able to adapt so well. What is that like when you're going from different teams,
It's interesting because as I have played longer in my career, I have certain expectations and like a reputation. And so when I first came to Portland, I was thinking, I'm just going to join the group, get my feet wet, not take on any leadership until I've like proven to the team that I deserve any sort of responsibility when it comes to leadership. And I remember the coaching staff being like, absolutely not. Like, we are bringing you here for your leadership. So it's been really interesting to see how changing teams has evolved as my career has gone on. But this most recent move has definitely been where I think my off-field work was almost more important than my on-field work, which was new for me.
Can you talk to us about that a little bit, and why has it been so important for you to not just be a leader with a club, but be a leader within the space of women's professional sports, specifically with the NWSL, and the advocacy work that you do as well?
I feel that we as athletes and, women's national team players and women's soccer players, we've been gifted this platform. And to me, there's just so many things that are not right. And it would be a dereliction of duty for me not to use this platform to at least impact some sort of change, even if it's affecting a few people, at least trying and attempting. And so hopefully there will be a day where I can just be a soccer player, but I don't think that's going to happen in my career. I don't even know if it's going to happen in my lifetime. So I'm going to dedicate as much time as I can to using that platform while still trying to be a kick-ass soccer player.
For you, when you mentioned the many things that still need to be changed, what is the key thing for you right now?
Oh gosh, key things. Pay equity, investment, to be completely honest, protecting women athletes. We hear about all the terrible things that have happened to women's gymnastics, and even with the NWSL about all the sexual allegations and also the emotional and psychological abuse that's happening. Like, we just need to, at a base level, protect women athletes from predators, from discrimination. And I think that's a huge thing that we're just starting to tackle.
And I think, Becky, a lot of people, when they speak to that point or even think about it, the perception is that, well, unless you're in it, you can't really do anything, or maybe that you shouldn't even do anything.
That's a good point.
But I think allyship is such a huge part of this, right? And whether it's fear of trepidation, fear of judgment, or fear of just even speaking up, I think there's something to be said for allyship. How important is that in this space for women's sports, especially for every single reason you just mentioned?
Oh, I think allyship is absolutely huge. And I think just in our pay equity fight with the national team, having the men's team speak for us and say they absolutely deserve the same treatment, the same pay as we do. We are doing the exact same job. The strength that a statement like that would have, and it's so easy for them to make because nothing's going to happen to them. Nothing's going to happen to the men. But to have them speak on our behalf as allies, I mean, it's huge. It makes the platform bigger. It puts more eyes on it. It gives it more credibility, even though it shouldn't. We should be credible in and of ourselves. But to have that added boost and support, it makes a huge difference.
As you're president of the national team, PA, what does that entail for you? How are you able to, I guess, lead that drive to make a difference in that role? Yeah,
it's an interesting time to be a president of the women's national team, PA. Right. We're, in the midst of our equal pay fight. We're appealing the original judgment summary that happened. And so leading the CBA negotiations right now, like, I'm really involved with that. And then there's also the lawsuit side of it. So that's two things. But then you also are in charge of enforcing the current CBA and protecting the players and making sure their livelihoods are taken care of. And so I wear a lot of hats, and being one of the members of the executive committee of the PA, I take a lot of pride in it. It's tough. It's a lot of work, and a lot of it goes unseen because it's just really nitty gritty things.
We had Megan Burke on recently, I think our very last episode, and she was speaking to the reality that a lot of the work that is done now is not necessarily, for example, for you. Like, you may not see the fruits of all of the effort that you're putting in, but how important is it to you to leave it better than you found it for the next wave of women who enter this league?
I see it as, like, I and, like, this current crop of players took up the mantle for the from the generation that came before us. And so it's been this just kind of like oncoming wave that just keeps building more and more momentum. And so when you take on the mantle, it's kind of understood that you're probably not going to benefit from the fruits of this labor. And you come to terms with it really early. I think just as women, that's just how it is right now. But that you know that it's going to be so worth it when finally that wave crashes and it's like everything is right. Everything that you work towards, you finally see it coming into fruition for a different generation, sure, but like at least it's happening. And so I kind of understood and accepted it early because it's how it is right now for women.
I think that's fascinating. Why do you think that is so positive in soccer? Like why are you guys able to do that so well? Because Megan alluded to it too, as MJ said, it seems like there's this understood, and maybe it's the camaraderie, I would think, right? That it's just special with the team. But what is it that allows you guys to be just so incredibly supportive of one another and moving that force forward?
For me, like when I think about specifically like the 1999 Women's World Cup team and what they did for women's soccer to put it on the map, and their first collective bargaining agreement, they were just fighting for a livable wage. They just wanted to be able to play soccer and make a living from doing what they love and not have to have some other side hustle. And so seeing that play out as a 14-year-old and seeing them fight, seeing them going to Congress, fighting for equal pay, fighting for the first professional league ever in the US, and just like appreciating that fight, like it was an honor to then take it from them and to continue that fight. And I don't know if that's just special women's soccer. I think a lot of women athletes have done that. I think we have just been very vocal. And I think the women's team has just been very blessed to be quite public and quite popular. So I think for us, it's just a little bit more visible.
It's really cool. It's really cool.
You mentioned earlier you wear many hats, right? And I think, Becky, it's like you didn't necessarily choose this life. It chose you, right? It just sort of comes with the territory of being in a position like yours. And there's so many nuanced topics and layers to being a professional female athlete, right? So on top of the fights for equity in many different realms, there's also a fight for gender equity and for just things being even a little bit equal. I mean, we saw it in women's college basketball last year and the disparity between weights, but there's things I think in terms of support for female athletes that most people wouldn't even think about, right? Genetically, we have to deal with a lot more than a man would have to. And I know that the US team actually has used like period tracking apps. This sounds like a hard pivot, but it's not. It's all related here in the past. Has that helped you learn more just about like being able to prepare adequately for shifting from a club team to then preparing for a national championship, and how something seemingly as easy as that can make such a big wave in what it means to perform at your best?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the period tracking and learning about your body and how you feel on certain days and which days, you need a little bit more protein or you need a little bit more rest and how your body reacts to that. I think that's all like the aggregation of marginal gains. Like you never know what's going to make the difference. And just no one was interested in studying this because it was a woman thing. And so we're just at, I think, the beginning of really looking into that and all the things that make a woman and how that does affect your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health.
We were, MJ and I, Becky, were blown away. Well, and I'm not trying to speak for you, MJ, but we talked about it after. We did an entire episode during the Olympics on that topic and spoke to several of the Olympians. And I just, going in and when we were even talking with producers before saying we're going to have a roundtable about period tracking and about this, I was like, okay, wow, this is going to be eye-opening. But it was so fascinating. And it was so, I left there being like, okay, there is so much I did not know. And we should be talking about this. The other thing I wanted to ask about that we've talked about is fertility. And for context here, Racing Louisville is the first NWSL team to provide fertility services. We can also mention that Nneka Ogwumike, she made headlines. Some people might remember this past summer for securing a deal for fertility testing and support. That was with Modern Fertility for all WNBA players, in addition to what's written into the WNBA's CBA. So what is your take on that and the role that fertility services play and the benefits, the rights that players should be receiving?
I think it's genius what Louisville did. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And as someone who's an older athlete, I'm 36, when I make decisions about my career, I very much have to think like, well, I want to start a family. Like, when do I need to do that? And there's just that added pressure that a lot of people in their careers just don't have to deal with, like having to make decisions about having their family. And I myself just froze embryos during December. So I made the decision that I didn't want that added pressure when trying to decide the future of my career to have to like stop just so I can have children. So I think what the WNBA did, I think that's so smart. It's such an expensive process though, to go through, freezing eggs or freezing embryos. And so I think any time that women can get support from leagues, from their own markets, from their own organizations, I think that's so genius. And I think that's the way that needs to go. I think that's the future of, protecting women and offering these services.
How much is it talked about among athletes? And is that something that you do remember hearing about when you were younger?
I very rarely heard anything about fertility services, and not until very recently with the Louisville announcement. And then also we had a women's health clinic with my Portland team where we brought in some doctors and they brought it up. And that actually got it going for me, feeling like, oh, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. So it's kind of newer. And I think women talk about it or maybe feel ashamed that they need to use fertility services. And I hope we can break that stigma, because if we can use that science to like fulfill a dream of yours to have a family, like why not do that?
Yeah, I think it's great.
These mics are very, very powerful. And I'm like wondering if it can pick up like how hard my heart is beating right now, because these are conversations I've literally had today, yesterday, with women in my life. And I think it's even this conversation speaks to how we're starting to destigmatize that shame that does become associated with thinking about fertility for various reasons, whether it's you're having issues reproducing, you and your partner are trying, or with just the thought of maybe I do, maybe I don't want a family, and those conversations and how people sort of look at you a little sideways if that is, the route that you're sort of thinking about. So it makes me really happy to hear that we can so freely start to talk about this. I mean, I was talking with somebody via text message yesterday and she just sort of threw it out there, and I was like, okay, we're doing this. Yes, girl. Yes. Let's have this conversation. Let's go. Whereas before it was so taboo, right? And I don't want it to be that way. I'm just a little older than you, Becky, and the same thing, and Lindsay, who has two beautiful children, but it's tough, within this space. If you're in sports, if you're in this kind of, space where the timestamp is so bright and it gets put on you so quickly, right? And it's like, well, if you want a career.
And if I can add to that a little bit, what you guys have both made me think about, and Becky, I think whether you said it or whether I read it somewhere prepping for this, you made me think a lot about, I think it's super powerful and awesome, even the act of talking about it, because it's connecting all of us. And it is what MJ just said, but also it is making a decision that is best for yourself. And that decision, to layer off of that, in our industry, MJ, like I think that we're getting to a point where we're having much more conversation, which is great, but there is a level of competition because that light is shown so bright. And if you choose to have kids, like I think what it was that I read, Becky, was you talking about not have, you want to be able to focus and have the time. It's very true. When you have those children, you have to make decisions. Like I've made decisions the past 2 years I would have never made or I would have been terrified to make, because I'm in that boat now where I'm like, my kids are 5 and 7 and that goes like that. And it's like, God, I want to have this career and I have a lot of career left, but it's terrifying. It really is. And you don't know, and you just have to believe in yourself and trust in yourself. So hearing you or reading what you said about making that choice, it just makes me think back, and like, that's what I want to tell younger people. Yes, do what you want to do what's in your heart, but you do need to know that then you have to back up what you believe in and what you want, and have to say that and have the courage to say it too. Becky,
did you feel supported? And you don't have to answer this. as you were even just researching or like having those conversations with other people in the same space as you, like, you know what? Yes. Or I went through it, or I thought about it. I feel like that's been really helpful too, as we continue to explore this, is feeling like you're not alone in that thought and in that process.
I felt extremely supported from my teammates because a lot of my teammates' partners have gone through the process. And so it was nice to be able to tap into that and to ask questions like, why do I feel this way today? You know, after injecting all these hormones into me. And then also broaching the subject with the national team, that to me was like kind of terrifying because I'm basically just cramming this month-long process in between, you know, 2 national team camps. And so even the decision to like go through the process of freezing embryos and potentially putting me behind in training to be prepared for the next camp, like to me, that was terrifying. I'm like, that it shouldn't be terrifying. And so having the open talk with my coaching staff, with my medical staff, sport performance, they all understood and they were pretty supportive. And so I am hopefully going into camp in a few weeks and I am undertrained, but we'll see how it goes. Cause in my heart, I know that I made the right decision.
How has it been, I guess, physically, and not to get too personal there, but like with the keeping that up, being physically prepared, have you found that there have been ways to navigate that you feel everything is going to be where it needs to be?
Well, it was the first time I ever had forced inactivity. Like they were like, you can't raise your heartbeat above 160. We need, you know, one leg on the ground at all times. So you can't run, but you can walk. You can't bike, but you can walk. You can't swim, you know? So I was really restricted in what I could do. And so I got very deconditioned and I knew that going in. And now that I'm dealing with the ramifications, it's tough to like get fit and get back into it. But I'm really willing to go through how hard it is right now for what'll be worth down the road for me.
Thanks for sharing that, Becky. I mean, I didn't even know that aspect of it. You see what I mean? Like, this is why these conversations are so important. My goodness. And while we're on that topic, like you said it perfectly, this is something you did for yourself. And I think that part of it, of removing that selfishness that's attached with making the right choices for you and for your family, the last 2 years have really brought that to surface, I think, for everybody as we continue to live now going into the 3rd year of this pandemic. Has there been a way, with all that you do, how much you train, the choices you're making for yourself and your personal life, how do you find, or what do you do to sort of center yourself and bring yourself a little bit of self-care, for lack of a better phrase?
Self-care. Well, I have never struggled with like hard chilling, and I can, I can read, I can game, I can take a bubble bath with a glass of wine and just get to that spot where it's like, okay, I am taking care of myself. I am getting back to where I need to be to make sure when I do face the world, I'm giving it the best version of myself.
You said books, and I know that you're an avid reader. There was also, I know I loved reading about your flute playing as a child,
Beautiful.
right? That your mom, is that right? Was it your mom who made you guys, you and your siblings, play an instrument? Can you share that story and how that manifested?
Yeah, I think it was her attempt to make us more well-rounded because we were all like decently athletic. But I think she very much is an academic. And so she wanted something else. And so I played the flute. My oldest brother played the trumpet. My middle brother played around with the saxophone and the drums. And she was just adamant that she really wanted us to do it throughout high school. And you can imagine, like, I had to be in marching band as a teenager. And so just imagine like thinking this is so embarrassing. And actually like looking back, like I can play an instrument. Like that's really cool. And
very cool. I
actually rented a flute while I was playing in Salt Lake City for the Utah Royals, just because I had so much time on my hands because I was living away from my partner Zola. And so I was like, what am I going to do with all this time? And I just got the flute and I picked it back up. And it was such a great way of spending time that was actually like doing something for me and making me happy.
Listen, my husband plays the guitar and he will not play for me. How can I get him to play? Well, I should maybe get him a guitar. That would probably be a helpful part of this. But I love that you play for your partner. That's amazing.
Do you have a go-to song? Is there a genre of music that you prefer to play?
I mean, I could rock out to some Disney. So give like a whole new world.
Oh my God. I wish you had a flute. Do you have a flute in your room?
Is the flute in the room?
No, it's not. I need to get it fixed. It's not. It's not working right now.
How do you fix a flute? I didn't even know you could fix a flute. What happens to a flute?
I didn't know it could break.
Super intricate. Yeah. No, it definitely can break. Things come loose. It's terrible.
Tell me you never played an instrument without telling me you never played an instrument. I had no idea. I played the recorder one time.
Oh my God.
In
Do you remember
elementary
that?
school, and it was
Yeah.
yes, it was Mary Had a Little Lamb. I think we all had to play that. I think that was it. But the flute is so cool. Like Lizzo plays the flute, and I love it.
She's making it cool again, so I appreciate that.
Super cool. Hey, you mentioned your partner, Zola, who also was a soccer player in college. Does he ever, does he try to give you advice? Do you guys ever share any information that's helpful?
Oh yeah. He loves women's soccer. So like I'll come back from practice and he's watching like a last week SEC game, so he's like really into it.
In it.
Yeah, we talk about it. I mean, he's the most supportive partner I could ever ask for. He comes to all the major tournaments, any game that he can come to, he comes to. We talk about it. He's just like, I don't know if I could have done this career without him as like just being that supportive. He's amazing. So yeah, he's absolutely wonderful. And I also drag him out to the soccer field and make him kick around with me just so I can get some extra training in. So he's still got a little bit left.
So he's useful.
I like
he's
that.
a useful engine.
Put him to work. I like it. The Winter Olympics starting up in a couple weeks. Any events that you cannot miss? Like, I got to record this one if I'm not home. Is there anything you really get hype about for the Olympics, Winter Olympics?
I mean, I love the speed skating, and I really do I like the figure skating as well, just because I'm like, this is so beautiful. And I know it's so hard what they're doing, but they make it look so graceful and effortless. Mm-hmm. Like, I really appreciate those types of things. And just, some of the downhill skiing and there's so many things that are so cool about the Winter Olympics.
I love hearing that. I want to hear also about the 2023 World Cup and the team, because the roster's young. It's young. What are the expectations in your mind?
First off, we have to qualify this year. So that's like plan number one. And the roster won't be announced for the 2023 for a while. And so it's kind of that new part of the cycle where, people retire or the coach starts to phase out some players. And so there's this kind of like turmoil that always happens at this time of the cycle. And we kind of saw it a little bit with that trip to Australia where the average age was like 26, which for us is so young. Usually we're such an older team. And I was lucky enough to be there and to see kind of these new players that were just getting their first appearances, scoring their first goals, having their first minutes, and to see that and to see like where the future is for this group. And it's so bright. And I was just like this proud, like mother hen, just like soaking it all in and being so happy. And I sincerely hope it's not the end of my national team career, but to know that the team is in such good hands, even if I should get phased out or to retire, like it was like my heart was full.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, how do you navigate that turmoil that you described? But I guess you just answered that question, right? It's embracing that aspect of it.
Yeah. I'm going to fight for my spot. And, when I cross those lines, like I'm going to show those young guns, why I'm here and why I'm relevant and what I can bring to this group. So it's definitely not over, but it's interesting now entering this part of my career, having now to be like, okay, I've done all this. This is my history, but like, I'm going to prove every single day why I had that history and why I'm going to continue having great history.
So good.
What does the future look like for you, Becky? Like once you decide you're done, teaching the young ones that they need to take a seat and watch Becky work, what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
My legacy, I hope, will always be like team first, like always put the collective over the individual. And I think being an athlete, like you're always going to be a little inherently selfish because like you do need to take care of yourself. You do need to in all ways take care of yourself and bring it every single day. But knowing that you're doing it for a bigger goal than just your individual success, that would be a great legacy that I can leave behind. And then as far as like a career after soccer, I feel like I have a PhD in the sport. I need to stick around. I need to do other things. So if that's, coaching or front office, or if it's more advocacy work, like I think I'll be around the game. I just love it too much to just leave it.
Yes, I love that. I wanted to ask you before we let you go about the leadership and going along with that. Abby Wambach, I remember one time shared just how she thinks leadership is everything and was giving examples. For you, can you share a practice that you do that is something that you feel really connects you to others, whether it's what inspired you to do the text messages that you send to everyone, or, or what it is and how you discovered that practice in yourself?
Yeah. So I'm like very introverted. So do I love getting up? Oh yes. I don't love getting up in front of big groups of people and taking charge and doing that. Like, so my leadership is very subtle, I would say. Like, to me, it's all about the individual relationships and having the people know that I genuinely care for them and I want to know about them and I want to know what they need to be successful and, their strengths and weaknesses. So how we can promote strengths and, minimize weaknesses. And so for me, it's all those small things like grabbing a coffee or sending a text message or pulling someone aside after practice and just being like, hey, how are you doing? And just having those little catch ups. For me, I've noticed that that's helped in when I need to make or help make bigger decisions or lead the group a certain way, that there's a trust built up because of all those smaller moments.
That's so cool.
I think that's what makes the difference, right? Knowing those details is so important, and knowing how you can help the overall team as well, because it is so many pieces coming together like a puzzle. Becky, thank you so much for all of the we have covered, everything in the spectrum and in between. We so appreciate your transparency, your vulnerability as well, here on Her Turf with us.
I know you said that you don't like being in front of crowds, but I would vote for you for president if you chose to do that.
Becky's already taken over the world.
That description was, that's just awesome. It's authentic connection. It's really awesome. Yeah.
No, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this. This is amazing.
Becky, thank you. Best of luck to you and all of it.
All right. Thank you.
So many takeaways, such a great episode, and also so much to watch for with Becky and her career, to see not only her playing days still with plenty remaining, but beyond. I'm really excited to see what she does. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Don't forget to rate and review On Her Turf on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to follow On Her Turf on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Plus, get the latest news in women's sports on our blog, NBCsports.com/onherturf. A special thanks to everyone involved in this NBC Sports and Blue Wire partnership. We'll see you next time.